The name for part 2 of 4. This articulation turning on a relentless play on language, it's in its very syncopations that we are to locate, in its diverse functions, the subject. Illustrations are never a bad way of putting a mental eye into use, in which the imagination plays a big role. It's for this reason that, even if it is a digression, I think it's a good idea with you rapidly to outline a little comment, simply because I find it there on this question in my notes. I have spoken to you on more than one occasion in relation to the signifier of Chinese characters, and I give great sway to unbewitching you of the idea that these are imitative depictions. There is an example that I only took up because it serves my purposes best. I took up the first articulated example of one of these, the archaic forms in the work of Karlgren, that is called Grammata Serica, which means precisely Chinese signifiers. The first one that he uses in its modern form is this one here. It is the character K. That means power in the Shuen, which is a distinguished scholarly work, precious to us both for its relatively ancient aspect, but which is already very scholarly, meaning interwoven with interpretations which we may come back to. It seems that it's not without good reason that we are able to trust in the route given by the commentator, and which is a real beauty, i.e. that it concerns the schematization of the collision of the column of air, such as it comes to push in the glottal stop against the obstacle opposing it, made by the back of the tongue and the palate. This is all the more seductive as an explanation because, if you open a study of phonetics, you will find an image that is approximately this one here, to explain to you the functioning of the occlusive, and you have to admit that it's not bad that it is this, K, that is chosen to illustrate the word power, the possibility, the axiomatic function introduced into the world by the advent of the subject right into the middle of the reel. The ambiguity is total for a great many of the words articulated K in Chinese, in which this will be used as a phonetic representation only given that ku, which completes them as if by presenting the subject to the signifying framework, and which, without ambiguity and in all the characters, is the representation of the mouth. Put this sign on top. This is the sign Da, which means big. It clearly has some relation to the little human form usually devoid of arms. Here, as it's a big person we're talking about, he has arms. This one, K, has nothing to do with what happens when you have added this sign to the preceding one, Da. That one thus reads Ji, meaning odd, strange. But that one retains traces of its ancient pronunciation, testified to by the usage of this term in the rhymes of ancient poems, namely those of Shi Jing, Book of Odes, which is one of the most fabulous literary misadventures, since it was fated to become a prop to all kinds of moralizing rantings, of being the basis of an entire form of a very twisted teaching on the duty of sovereigns and of the people and of all the rest, whereas it is clearly a set of love songs of peasant origin. A bit of knowledge of Chinese literature. I am not trying to make you think that I have a wide knowledge of it. I'm not claiming to be Weiger, who, when he makes an allusion to his experience in China, it's in a paragraph that you can find in the books available to everyone of Father Weiger. In any event, there are others who have also lit the way in this regard, namely Marcel Granet, of whom you would, after all, lose nothing in opening his beautiful books on dances and legends and on festivals and songs of ancient China. With a little effort, you could familiarize yourselves with this truly fabulous dimension. which comes from what can be done with something that rests on the most elementary forms of signifying articulation. By chance, in this language, the words are monosyllabic. They are superb, unchanging, cubic, you cannot mistake it. They are identifiable with the signifier, it has to be said. You have groups of 4 lines, each composed of 4 syllables. It's a simple setup. If you look at them and think that everything that can be got out of that, even a metaphysical doctrine that bears no relationship to the original signification, that should, for those amongst you who are not yet there, start to get you to open your minds. And yet it is like that. Centuries of moral and political teaching have been done to a refrain that, as a collection, signifies, I really want to shag you. There is no exaggeration on my part here, go and have a look. So this one means J, which is annotated as meaning big power, enormous. This of course bears no relation to this conjunction of K and Da, nor does J really mean big power, but rather this little word for which there isn't truly something in French that is satisfactory. I am forced to translate it as ampère in French, with the meaning that the word ampère can have a slipping, of fault, of flaw, of something wrong that limps along, so nicely illustrated by the word odd in English. And as I told you earlier, this is what got me started with the Shi Jing, Book of Odes. Because of the Shi Jing, we know that this was very close to the Ke. At least in the sense that there was a glottal stop in the ancient language, on which was established the other usage of this signifier, indicating the phoneme Ki. If you add this one in front, which is a determinative, the one for tree, and which indicates everything to do with wood, you would have, once things are there, a sign that indicates chair. This one is said Yi, and so on and so forth. It continues in this way. It has no reason to stop. If you put here in place of the sign of tree the sign of a horse, Ma, this one means to sit astride. This little detour, I think so anyway, has its use. In order to get you to see that the relationship between the letter and language is not something that can be considered to be an evolutionary progression. It does not start from an origin that is thick, substantial, in order to pull away from that into an abstract form. There is nothing that resembles anything that could be conceived as a parallel to the so-called process of this concept, even in just a generalized way. We have a succession of alternations, in which the signifier goes back and beats, if I may say so, the flowing water with its mill wheel, each time coming back up with something still streaming away, in order to fall back again to be enriched, made more complex, without us ever being able at any moment to grasp what is in control, the concrete beginning or the equivocation.